Auto insurance can all seem the same until it comes time to use it. So don't get stuck paying more for less coverage. Switch to USAA Auto Insurance and you could start saving money in no time. Get a quote today. Restrictions apply.
USAA. So good, so good, so good.
Just in and so good. Thousands of spring finds up to 70% off are at Nordstrom Rack stores now. And that means thousands of fresh reasons to rack.
How did I not know Rack has Adidas?
Vince, Calvin Klein, Rag & Bone?
Obsessed. Why do we rock? For the hottest deals.
Save on Madewell, Kate Spade New York, Sam Edelman, Joe's, and more. Great brands, great prices. That's why you rack.
I think I just won my taxes.
Yeah?
I just switched to H&R Block in about 1 minute. All I had to do was drag and drop last year's return into H&R Block, and bam, my information is automatically there.
So I don't have to go digging around for all my old papers to switch?
Nope.
Sounds like we just leveled up our tax game.
Switching to H&R Block is easy. Just drag and drop your last return. It's better with Block.
It's really cool.
Bonjour, hello, and welcome to the Rosbifs Rugby Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things French rugby, the top 14, Pro Day, the Nationale, French national team, the Champions Challenge Cups, most importantly, the towns, cities, food, restaurant, bars, people, fans, stadiums, everything that makes French rugby so bloody excellent. Rob, it's been a couple of days since our first French sojourn of the year, which we'll be going into a bit more detail in a moment. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm all right. I'm a bit more human today. I'm not wearing, unfortunately, a hat from our trip because I managed to lose my hat, which I'm still very sad about. Left it on the train after it was trying to dry it out after a very, very, very soggy afternoon in Périgueux. And I managed to leave it on the train. But I am wearing my new hoodie.
Oh, one in, one out.
Which actually got spotted by someone in the Ube shop and they asked, were you there last night? A couple of English lads. So hello lads, if you're listening. I did recommend the podcast, but they didn't seem that interested. But fair play if you if you are listening.
Good.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right. Yeah, I'm absolutely fine. Yeah, enjoyable weekend.
Yeah, very enjoyable, very hectic, but bloody good to be there. And 3 very different match experiences, which was quite cool. And one new ground for both of us out of the 3. But yeah, very good to kind of validate how good SAXV was or Soyaux Angouleme was in Stade Chanzy.
Yeah, fantastic place. We'll get into that in a bit. Should we start off though with both the cherry on the cake of both the trip and probably the game of the weekend, certainly in terms of results, upsets, so on. We were there, 9:15 p.m. kickoff amongst a fairly raucous bunch at the Stade Chaban-Delmas for UBB versus Lyon, which I think it's fair to say didn't quite go the way we anticipated it to.
I don't think anyone saw this result coming, did they? Even with the kind of players away and, the doublons is an interesting time because of the players missing or the players have been away during the week. Even so, it was kind of, I think we were waiting for the onslaught to come, weren't we? It was kind of Maxime Lucu and Jalabert on the bench. When are they going to bring them on? And then all hell will break loose when those two come on and they'll let rip. But yeah, that never quite happened, really.
No, it was a strange old game. I mean, for one, it's my second time at the Chaban-Delmas. The first was best part of a decade ago, and
December 2016. So yeah, that was quite a while ago.
The world's hottest December day from memory. And it really is. I think that it has to be certainly club level of the grounds I've been to. I think it's the best top 14 one. It's quite a remarkable place.
Yeah, I was going to kind of ask you for your reflection because I've been pretty vocal or pretty effusive in my praise for Stade Chaban-Delmas on this podcast. But you kind of, it's been a while. And did you feel it lived up to the hype, or can you see why people bang on about it? Or expand a bit more on your thoughts on Stade Chaban-Delmas.
Explain your working for an extra mark.
Yeah.
I think for one, just to look at architecturally, it's a beauty, isn't it? It stands out amongst, I suppose, a lot of the grounds in the top 14 are probably of a similar age and a similar size. And a bit like a lot of the kind of mid-tier clubs in English football, as good as the stadiums can be in the atmospheres, they're quite identical or similar-ish. Maybe with the exception of like the Marcel Michelin and places like that. So I think the fact you've got this
I'd say La Défense is slightly less identikit.
True, very true.
Even like Stade Jean-Bouin, you can make it as pink as you like. It's still a little bit. It's in the same mold, isn't it? Of that kind of very new. All the colour is kind of all the same for your club and possibly a plastic pitch, and it's very shiny and modern and good height and everything like that. Whereas it's still old school. Like the seats were very, very tight.
Yeah, probably tighter than they were when we visited 9 years ago, I'd imagine, between us. I don't know if that's to do with the ground or individual sizing. But yeah, it's just a fantastic place to look at, to be in. The atmosphere is fabulous, as you'd expect. It's a brilliant atmosphere, pretty organic as well. I think it's just people there having a good time. The tickets were what? I mean, they were €10. We were behind the post, but the view is more than good enough. It's just a brilliant place to watch rugby in a wholesome, dare I say, sort of atmosphere. Loads of different people.
Yeah,
not too many dickheads knocking about, and a brilliant club shop.
And a brilliant mascot.
And a brilliant pair of dueling mascots. Will they, won't they? Leo and Leia. It's like, who knows? I don't know if that's a saga that's been going on for many years, but sign me up. Better than anything I've ever seen in EastEnders. The only other thing I'll say that doesn't work for it was I had a hot dog in the ground, which was probably one of the worst things I've ever eaten in my life. But we'll let them off.
Oh, really? I think the food was underwhelming. I had a jambon beurre, and it needed more beurre. But it's weird, that, isn't it? Because Bordeaux is such a great place for food, and French rugby grounds generally are pretty good. Like, we had our fill of Merguez sausage over the weekend from the other two. But yeah, that's the kind of one thing that's lacking. The one thing I would say as well is, like, what did you make of like the après match?
It was
basically
right.
a gig. It was like a DJ set gig in the kind of outside the bodega as opposed to in the bodega, which is an interesting choice given how cold it was.
I guess it was, by that point, it was 11:10 though.
Yeah.
Probably can't be bothered to set up a band indoors when people are clattering about, but
it did genuinely feel like après. Like, it was kind of like what you see from people skiing, of like a gig late at night after, and just a kind of open air DJ set almost. I would have preferred that. I would have liked a bit of the bandas, which we were treated to at SAXV and at Périgueux. But I would have quite liked a little bit of brass band stuff, as much as they did play some of the French classics like Don Les Yeux d'Emily during the gig. My abiding memory of the last time you and I were at Stade Chabannes was you prancing around, being serenaded by a brass band, prancing around the Chabannes with an extra Chiefs flag and a headdress on.
Simpler times.
Yeah, back when those were allowed.
Yeah.
So I'd have quite liked a bit of that, and like they do the weird like crowd surf thing normally, and I didn't see any of that, which is a shame. But it's still quite lively after.
It was lively, yeah. It was very lively. The game itself, then, I think you summarised it in terms of certainly how we viewed it pretty well there. Just expected Bordeaux to crackle into life at some point, and they just didn't really. And that's in no small part. I thought Lyon were pretty fair for their win. To be honest, they were pretty tenacious. Bench was good, and we have to talk about the man David Niniashvili, who appeared to be pretty much everywhere from what we could see.
He was on another level. I know that kind of sounds very cliche or like kind of write off, but he oozed X Factor. If it's possible to ooze X Factor, you just knew that he was going to do something, and he was all kind of always there to add something on another that was just better than other people around him. I think it's kind of quite hard to explain how good he looked compared to people around him. I think that everything he did was like sprinkled with a little bit of stardust or excellence or just another level skill. Yeah,
he was awesome, and he was ultimately probably the difference between the two sides, because nobody for Bordeaux quite reached that level. Not least either of Jalabert Lucu or Nicolas Deporter when they came off the bench.
Yeah,
there were sort of little glimmers of it, but they never really, in the way they look like they're just going to cut teams to ribbons. It never really looked like that.
No.
It all looked a little bit ponderous, a little bit, maybe a bit harsh to say, sort of going through the motions, but as if it was going to happen at some point because it happens so often. Yeah, the whole thing was a little bit blasé. Not least the way they conceded the penalty, which Leo Bergier slotted to give. Well, that's what, twice this season. Second last play of the game, he's kicked Lyon to wins against Bordeaux.
Bit of minerals because he absolutely hooked one in front of the post early on in the game. So he's clearly got a bit of, and he's done that before in a few games where he's just has one kick that is just woefully bad, one or two kicks woefully bad, and he's kind of got some minerals to kind of come back from it because they got the points, didn't they, to get them in the lead, and then they tried to play out from their own 22 and conceded. It's so obvious, almost like, well, just don't play out of your own 22 because all it needs is someone to go off their feet and the rest going to give a penalty. And lo and behold, that is what happened, which was just a bit crap. It's just not least dull thinking, isn't it?
Well, not least from someone we absolutely love, because it's obviously Luke who's at the base of that ruck. I'm pretty sure he gave it to the under-20s lad. Is it Ngumbu, who's playing his third professional game, who's basically on his own with no one around him. And you say Julie gets turned over. So yeah, just a bit, I don't know, a little bit. If I was Toulouse watching that, or Leinster with an eye to the European Cup, I'd be encouraged, I would say.
Yeah. Benny Taps was pretty good. It's quite weird, like the kind of slightly more underrated, unheralded player like Ben Tapawai was pretty. I thought Jerry Carberry was actually pretty good. Generally.
Yeah, he was.
He obviously kind of is the main man to start, and then as soon as Jalabert and Luca come on, he has to play third fiddle. But he slotted in at 15 for Nonce du Quang, pod favourite, who didn't quite have a brilliant game, looked a bit rusty after, because he's not had a lot of rugby over the last 12 months. A couple of players I thought did play well. Another podcast favourite, Timo Mathieu, I thought was very good. He's in the France squad this week, and he was in the squad in the autumn, but he's just a brilliant athlete. I think when we saw him at Biarritz January last year, he was very, very good ball carrier, showed real dynamism and pace. But I think what you kind of perhaps didn't notice then was just his work rate around the park and the athleticism at line-out time. He's just their main man at line-out time. Speaking of main men at line-out time, another player that's been added to the France squad for this week. Sorry, and just say we will do a France, those people waiting for Six Nations stuff, we will do a Six Nations special later on in the week, probably when we know the France team, although we probably will find it out on Tuesday today. But Dylan Cretin was added to the France squad, and he's just everywhere. Again, a brilliant athlete at line-out time. I just love these. I've got a real love for these French sixes that just kind of 6 or 7s that kind of just do a little bit of everything and are everywhere on the pitch and just brilliant athletes at line-out time. I think they're just quite cool to be that good, all round. I just love to have that level of athleticism and stamina and strength.
It's a nice arc for him as well, who, I say, we'll talk about this in more detail, whether he'll make the 23, probably not, but I don't think he's been in a wider French squad for some time. And
don't think since the World Cup, or maybe before the World Cup.
He's been doing the business for a while, few injuries, great name, lots to love, fantastic player.
Yeah.
But yes, Lyon do the double over Bordeaux. Probably
that's their first ever win at Stade Chaban-Delmas.
In the top 14, I believe.
Ah, okay. Oh, wow.
Yeah. We just want to.
So they've been Stade Bordelais back in 2003 or something.
Something like that. So that, shock defeat for Bordeaux means they are now level on points with Toulouse, who, after an uncomfortable first half, came past Montpellier in a sodden-looking Ernest Vallon, as a lot of places were over the weekend.
Should say that the Sud-West was damp on Saturday, and we managed to catch ourselves in it at every opportunity. We seemed to follow it around. It was only until, or rather, it followed us around. But it was only until Bordeaux, which would have had a lot of rain during the day. I think it was actually dry throughout the game itself, but it was only until that late on that we saw the weather improve. But all over the southwest, it was chucking it down, which was pretty annoying in January. Thinking, every time I've been to France, it's always glorious weather and sunshine, and Bordeaux, it'll be winter, but I'll be there in a t-shirt because it's always sunny. And no, I was in 4 layers, scarf, and still cold. But
and still didn't bring a fully waterproof jacket. But yeah, we live and learn, don't we?
Yeah. Well, I don't own one, so I think that's probably part of that.
Wandering.
I maybe I should have splashed out on a Périgueux Kappa full waterproof or a Soyaux Angouleme
Argent trench coat.
Yeah.
That's what you need. So Toulouse
did score some phenomenal tries, though.
It did, particularly given the weather. Some of the handling looked pretty rude. And
Paul
celebrated with
your favourite player, Paul Grau.
Not my favourite player. He did look like he had a very good game, in fairness. Well, he's got to take his chances, isn't he, when Antoine's not there? Which means then, in third place, the Sunday night game, Toulon dusted aside La Rochelle in a game that you described as not very good.
I would say not a thing of great beauty would probably be. They were the only 2 teams in the top 6 to win this weekend, Toulon and Toulouse.
There you go.
So everyone, although they all lost, Bayonne, Clermont and La Rochelle all lost. So, and UBB, but there was very little movement in the top 6 because they all lost. The Toulon game was a weird one, I'd say. The scoreline looks like it should have been free-flowing, running rugby, points galore, and it wasn't. The La Rochelle had a brilliant start. They were like 17-0 up after 2 brilliant bits of play from a man capable of absolutely everything on a rugby pitch, good and bad, in Antoine Astoy, who showed his full repertoire of good and bad throughout this game. He set up a lovely try for Juani Bosmaran, who's a young player who, when I've seen him in the under-20s, looks like a big physical winger. He's absolutely tiny. The Dylan Lay's try was really cool. It's a brilliant read from Hastoy, and then the timing and weight of the kick through for Lades. It's beautiful. And just the Bosmaran thing's an interesting one because La Rochelle, they do now have quite a few injuries. Their players they lose to France tend to be kept by France, like Aldrit, Antonio, Colombe, Boudon, like all their big players actually stay with the squad. And so they played quite a young side. Certainly on the bench, there was some baby-faced chaps coming off the bench. They looked like boys against this Toulon side. I know Toulon are a massive, massive side, and Ribbons just looks absolutely enormous at all times. Halangahu was really, really physical as well. Just looked like a bit of a bully in a good way. That kind of is how Toulon won. They just kind of bullied them. And they kind of perhaps bullied Paul Williams because I think Ronan O'Gara was pretty critical of the refereeing afterwards. Shock. Yeah. But they seemed to get quite a lot of penalties from Paul Williams. I think it was 14 La Rochelle gave away to Toulon's 8. It felt like a very stop-start game generally. It was quite weird having a Kiwi ref, and I noticed this in the Castres game as well. There was having a Kiwi ref, none of which can speak French really. I think he was lucky with Toulon that one captain was Dylan Lays. Serran was actually captain, but you've got Ribbons there. You've got Garbisi who speaks very good English. The key players across the both sides do speak English. Kurt Barlow as well, another one. But he kind of just kept giving penalties to Toulon, and it was kind of like, right, Toulon are going to run it up the guts, direct, until either another penalty gets given or they score a try. It was very pick and go, one man out rugby. There was no attacking intent. There wasn't kind of clever kicking. It was just, we are going to run over you eventually. And it wasn't kind of like the La Rochelle versus Bath, where it's kind of driving maul and we're steamrolling you. It was just one out runners, bang. One out runners, bang. Yeah. And La Rochelle, in fairness, defended brilliantly. Like, their centres were huge, Souteni and Favre. They had that new guy, I'm not going to remember his name, but I think he was on debut, Kiwi Samoan lad at 6, who had a bit of a mixed bag, but was a pretty physical defender. Haddad, I thought, was pretty good as well. Player that's generally just, for me, a name on a sheet, or certainly plays second fiddle to the likes of Boudon and Jegu. I thought he was pretty good, kind of stepping up with a few players missing. But yeah, Toulon weren't great. Well, you could say they weren't great, or you could say they played to their strengths. They just ran over people, and I feel like they've done that a couple of times. They've not been at their best at the mile, and they've just it's just come through. Like they just kind of get the ball, keep the ball, and eventually they'll score. It's kind of, I feel like the Castres game was a little bit like that. Certainly. And so they are now one of two unbeaten sides at home, the other being Bayonne. But they're going to be hard to beat, because if they can keep the ball, get the ref on their side, which they tend to do at Mayol, they're just going to steamroller teams. Yeah,
they've got a lot going for them, Toulon, as we've said, I think a lot this season. You mentioned Bayonne there, who unbeaten at home but did lose on the road to Perpignan. Pretty
strong side they sent.
Valuable win, and yeah, they haven't been mugs away from home this year, so that's a pretty good outcome for Perpignan, who have wavered a little bit, haven't they?
Yeah,
at
they
times
were
at home.
I think that looked like a full strength Perpignan side. They look, after a lot of injury, I think they're probably still missing Van Tonda and Pasolo Tuolangi, but that generally it looks like they've got a lot of their players back now, and they're fit, and they've got a bit more game time under the belt, which is good signs for Perpignan, because they have been pretty patchy. Still not scoring a load of points, but
so they sit above in the table. Racing, whose season appears to be falling apart even more than it has been already. They lost at home to a team who appear now be unconquerable away from home, in my beloved Castres, who
lose in blue, basically. Castres, they're just playing some fantastic stuff.
The Sudorni era is off to a flyer. Yeah, two away wins on the bounce, having not won away from home all season, and having not really, well, they've been close, but no, quite a few games not really in it. They're looking great. They're looking in the really second half here, but they looked really slick. Louis Lebrun, who has also been called into the wider French squad, which is really cool for him, seems to be pulling the strings nicely. Arata back starting at 9, which feels like a little bit of a seed change from, I don't know if that was horses for courses, but it appears to have worked. And
you'd think he's a better player on that fast deck, wouldn't you? And he nearly 100%. Scored a brilliant try at the end of the first half, and it needed a desperate tap tackle from Hambosi, who was probably the only player on the pitch that was going to get there to make that tap tackle. But Arata showing some real pace.
Yeah, and as for Racing, well, they've now fully plummeted into the kind of relegation mixer. Same before this game. I mean, I've probably given them the benefit of the doubt more than most, but before this game, you would say the block of fixtures coming up. They've got Farrell back. They seem to be playing people roughly in position. Taufa Fanu is available. The chance that they could have won, you probably should be beating Castres at home, albeit they're playing some good rugby. But they've got to host Van, which is fascinating. Away to La Rochelle, which is a bit daunting, and then home to Pau. So in theory, I would have said you've got 3 out of 4 games there that you probably should be winning. And to lose that first one to Castres, that's a proper hammer blow, and it's not looking amazing for them.
I think the key thing to note in those, though, is that those are doublons. Like, they are right in the, certainly that Van one is actually, no, that might be the first break. They might be on break weekends in the Six Nations, but the 2 home games may well be in the break weekends, but they're going to be this similar sort of side. So they're not going to have Le Garec, which is quite key. I think Clovis Lebai, actually, from what I saw, was pretty good in this game. Right. Actually, he looked much better. You mentioned there the big elephant in the room, which is Owen Farrell. For our audience is obviously going to have an English tinge to it, and there are a few better English players ever than Owen Farrell. Whichever way you look at it, whatever your stance on him, he has been a very, very, very good English player. He is the record point scorer after all. Personally, I was always a George Ford fan, and because I think there was more instinctive play from George Ford, but I was never Farrell's rubbish. I always thought he was a bit undersold as a player. So I'd put myself as an 8 out of 10 Owen Farrell fan, 7 or 8 out of 10 Owen Farrell fan. And I just think it's quite sad watching him now. He just looks so far away from the player that he can be. He's clearly still bothered by that injury because he's not kicking that much at all. But also he's not in it. We're so used to, like, love him or hate him, Owen Farrell being in the thick of it. Certainly in a scrappy game or like a game where they're losing, you see him getting angry. He didn't look quite as angry, or there was none of that bite that we're used to seeing, like, in everything he does. It was kind of, he was a remarkably peripheral player in that first half. I've not seen a load of the second half, but I assume he must have gone off at some point because I can't believe he's playing 80 minutes at the moment. But he just looks, he barely touched the ball, and when he did, it's like, well, that's just anyone that could do that, really. We're not seeing Owen Farrell take charge and boss people around, and
it has to be injury related. If you're struggling to have the involvement in a game that you normally would, particularly at, like, with the boot, then it's going to impact you, isn't it? Like, there's no two ways about it. But agreed, he looked sort of cut a slightly forlorn figure, didn't he?
And he didn't look like up for it's not quite the right word. He wasn't like getting about, like his movement just looked quite slow, and it didn't look like he was kind of going, like, wanting to get himself in the game, which is so weird. And I don't think it's a language barrier thing, because he's got English speakers around him with Lancaster, Tuisova, Tedder, Max Spring speak English. You know, those guys are all basically, the whole back line outside of Labai is English speaking. So it's not that. I think it's the injury, which is, and they've got a bit of a problem now, because hopefully they need him to get fit and find some form, because we kind of know that Dan Lancaster's not quite there. Like, there was one crossfield kick where he's got loads of space to aim for, and he still doesn't hit his man and still kicks it long. It's like, unless they want to go Gilbert and then put Farrell at 12, but I just can't see that happening.
It feels like that would not be the worst shout. That looks like quite a good, at least on paper, midfield, if you can keep Tuisova out there.
But I don't think Faz has got the physicality at the moment.
Maybe not.
There was one big hit on Papali'i, who had a brilliant game as well. But we're just not seeing. We're not seeing Farrell. We're seeing a bloke
injured Farrell.
Yeah, he's
basically
injured.
Yeah, fair enough. Their Racing's crosstown rival Stade Francais lost away at Vannes, which makes that bottom three increasingly tasty. There's not that many. We're 6 points now between Vannes in 14th. Stade are on 24 and Racing on 26, with Perpignan sitting just above that. So that does, that has very quickly become like a genuine relegation battle. You'd still think Vannes probably up against it a bit with the way they've been away from home, but you never know. Like, someone big is getting dragged into that melee.
Yeah, personally, I'm hoping that Poe can avoid it. At least the access match. I think it'd be fascinating if we saw Racing or Stade in the access match.
Yeah,
I just want that for the storyline, bit like Montpellier as well last year. You kind of want the bigger name in there for the storyline, just the drama, the tension. And
well, Poe did their chances. Well, did themselves no harm with a decent win over Clermont, didn't they, at home in genuinely sopping conditions.
Yeah.
In a game that, from the bits I saw, looked to me like Clermont had the lion's share of possession territory, but their scrum completely backfired, which is the total opposite of what you'd expect coming in.
Yeah,
Poe were really clinical. Lovely try by our man, Theo Atasogbe, who could well be in the French side this weekend. Yeah. So, yeah, very good for them.
Atasogbe is ready. Get your Salt Bay celebrations ready. That's because they're a bit of a kryptonite side for Clermont. Just their style of play. Their style of play is exactly how Poe don't want to be coming up against. So, great win at home. I think they caught them at a good time, to be honest.
Definitely. Excellent rounds, top 14, few turn-ups, top sides maybe not pulling it out of the bag, which is great.
Always leaves you wanting more before a break, the top 14.
Well, it's got to be a good thing, right? Pro Data and a bit of Nationale coming up next.
Life is made up of many gorgeous moments. Cherish them all, big and small, with Blue Nile. Whether it's for yourself or a loved one, Blue Nile's unrivaled selection of expertly crafted fine jewelry and statement pieces help make all your moments sparkle. Blue Nile's experts are on hand to guide you, and their diamond guarantee ensures you get the highest quality at the best price. Celebrate a life well lived in the most radiant way and save up to 30% at BlueNile.com. That's BlueNile.com.
Look around. You can find cars like these on AutoTrader, like that car riding your tail. Or if you're tailgating right now, all those cars doubling as kitchens and living rooms are on AutoTrader too. Are you working out and listening to this ad at the same time? Well, multitasking pro, cars like the ones in the gym parking lot are for sale on AutoTrader. New cars, used cars, electric cars, maybe even flying cars. Okay, no flying cars, but as soon as they get invented, they'll be on AutoTrader. Just you wait. AutoTrader.
O'Reilly. Check engine light on? Take the guesswork out of your check engine light with O'Reilly Veriscan. It's free and provides a report with solutions based on over 650 million vehicle scans verified by ASE certified master technicians. And if you need help, we can recommend a shop for you. Ask for O'Reilly Veriscan today.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
As ever, Nationale served up the goods, albeit it was big wins, pretty much aplenty across the top six. So things are looking pretty congested. Albi away from home, Rouen as well, got decent victories on the road. Chambry went to Bourg-en-Bresse, a little bit of a derby, give or take. Sort of roughly the right side of the country, got a big win there, 32-5. But most importantly, c'est à Périgueux, Dordogne, possibly in there as well, in the official naming. Won at home to Marc-en-Barruel from Lille, and we were there to witness it. Rob, you wanted to get to a Nationale game. Thoughts, having been to one?
Yeah, really cool. Really liked it. We didn't do ourselves any favours by going four sides of a square to get to the entrance, and it was in the pissing rain, so we turned up wet and cold and never quite warmed up. Had we been in higher spirits, I think it would have been even more enjoyable. But good ground. I liked it. I really liked it. More merguez and chips, and baguettes, which was brilliant. It was really nice food. That was really cheap as well for the amount of food we got for that. I think it was like €7 for a really good feed there. Beer tasted good, but quite a nice stand. I would say it was comparable to a championship game, possibly a little bit bigger. If I think of Richmond, it's certainly bigger than Caldy, but that's not hard, I know. But a similar sort of vibe to Richmond, maybe a bit of a London Welsh vibe to it, possibly a few more than London Welsh, but I think London Welsh are a slightly separate beast, aren't they? Yeah, I thought it was really cool as a place. Good stash shop, albeit a small one. What did you think?
Enjoyed it. It was great. Quality of rugby was really good, albeit in conditions that weren't exactly ripe for running rugby. It was basically a mud bath. And we saw, as we'd hoped, with a little bit of lower league French rugby, like just a touch of farce at times with some a very, very aggressive PA system that would kind of rip your eardrums out. A replacement prop for Lille coming on, seemingly
he was
being
enormous.
sniped. He was a big lad, getting sniped.
Picking it up
crowd.
at the back of the field as well. What was he doing hanging back for kick receipt?
Does what he wants, mate. He then went down and in the rain and very, very quickly waved on the physios to get him out of there, which was very enjoyable. But it was it was a lot of fun.
I think he was actually a second row because the replacement tight head was
although he
had the gut of a prop. The replacement tight head was a little bowling ball of a bloke who was instant cult figure. He was actually a really good scrummager. I thought the skill level, because it was old school minging rugby or minging weather. Sorry, it was wet. Like the players were caked in mud coming off the pitch for their warm up. The warm up had torn up the pitch, and some of the skill level was excellent. Like the handling at times was brilliant. Some of the kicking from Max Green, Englishman, playing at 9 for Périgueux, former Bath and Harlequins man, I think. He was really good. His box kicking was brilliant. I thought we saw some brilliant box kicking across the weekend, generally. But he was really good. And then the kind of, I think it's slightly harsh to call him an Andy Good style, but Anderson Neeson the 10 for Périgueux, also had a brilliant kicking game. He was, we were debating whether Périgueux was fully professional. I'd say there's some areas of his life that aren't entirely professional. But the star man was Naho Merrigan, who I hope I said that right, but a former Bath man, played a couple of games with Bath in the Prem Cup, Englishman, and he scored a couple of tries from number 8, but he was kind of everywhere, really physical, really good ball player, aggressive. Yeah, he was getting stuck in both sides of the ball. I wonder, because he's still pretty young, he's 23. I wonder if we will see him rise through the ranks, because he was
very possible.
He looked a different level, I would say, to some of the others. He looked like he was capable of more growth, which would be interesting one. So Neho Merrigan, one to watch out for there. And Victor Fee Ballas Birel, the tight head prop for Marcon Barroel, Lille, OMR, whatever you want to call them, replacement tight head.
Keep an ear out.
Victor Fee Ballas Birel, who looked like an absolute legend.
Definitely. Quick, just a very brief aside, sort of Petit-Fours-esque on Périgueux. So one of the nipped into a shop near the ground, which had a fantastic array of rugby memorabilia in it, which I think I've sent you a photo of. There was one English team's kit in there, or a cap, which was Harlequins. Bit of a connection there with Max Green at 9. But it transpires the only evidence I could find of Périgueux playing an English team was Harlequins in 2000. They played them twice, once in 1998 and once in 2001. So in 2001, they won. Well, Périgueux lost at home. They lost 55-10 in a game that the Evening Standard report described as, where was it? They then had to travel to Brive in the quarterfinal. Quinn's tie against Périgueux was marred by gouging, off-the-ball violence and a sending off, and they are bracing themselves for another hard-fought clash.
Wow.
So it was actually the year Harlequins won what was then the European Shield, the Challenge Shield, I think it was called. And they beat...
What year is this, sorry? 96?
2001.
Oh, 2001, wow.
Okay. So they also, in their group, they had Dax, so nice little segue to the weekend. And they beat in the final Narbonne, who extra time at the Madstad, the Medeski, and on the Narbonne side, or marshalling the Narbonne side from 10, was someone we'll be seeing a lot of in the next few
I know the answer.
weeks. Go on.
Gonzalo Quesada,
a pretty young Gonzalo Quesada. So Périgueux at the heart of all of that.
What? So they were in the top 14, were they?
Yeah, I guess so. Unless they opened it up more broadly, but I think they must have been.
And Dax must have been. Jesus.
Yeah, Dax definitely.
And also, just a note on Marcon Barroel, who do sit 13th ahead of Ier Carcaron, who are down and out. Pretty tough to go all the way from basically Belgium to the Dordogne in the pissing rain and get nilled. They weren't dreadful, but they were...
No, not at all.
They weren't. They didn't show that much. They showed a bit of skill here and there, but not holding out too much hope for that, which is a shame because it's quite cool to have that outpost, because they actually had on their team sheets, a lot of club sides kind of have a little marker or an asterisk for players that have come through the academy. They had one which was like a little lion of players from the Lille area or Belgian origin. So that was, and I think there was a couple of Belgian players inside. So they'd probably play quite an important role for that. So it'd be nice to see them do well. Really nice logo, really nice kit, like yellow and blue, quite Clermont-esque, but yeah.
Very cool.
Fingers crossed for OMR. I think that's easy. That's less of a mouthful than Marcon Barroel, which we're almost certainly saying wrong as well.
Right, on to Pro Day Deux then. We were there for Soyaux Angouleme, but before that, on the Thursday night, Owen's remarkable turnaround continues. They fairly dusted Brive, and they're now only a few points behind in the table. Provence, who have been going well, felt faltered down in Aurillac. Can you do it on a cold Friday in Aurillac? As the old adage goes, Provence couldn't. It was a classic down in Nevers.
Beaten quite badly. They were quite a long way up, actually. Aurillac then in that first half. That was a bit of a comeback. So Aurillac was kind of dusted them really, and that was full noise at Provence. I think their centres were Gopper. I think their midfield was Plisson, Gopper, North with Finau on the bench, which is pretty useful.
Good side Aurillac. The 1 point classic down at Nevers, Argennes. So Nevers go 2 from 2, having beaten Brive, and then I guess arguably one of the more consequential
they're like
games.
5 from 5. They're like 5 wins in 6 now, Nevers. They're the form side in Pro Day Deux.
Them and Owen are absolutely flying. And at the bottom of the table, Valence beat Stade Niçois fairly comfortably as well, but 57 points. Stade Niçois do unfortunately look rather, they've been fully cut adrift now. We will see. There could be a sting in the tail. Rouen last year came back into it.
That's what I was about to say. I think Rouen at this stage of the season were about 16 points adrift and were a metre on a missed penalty away from staying up completely. Like not even 14th place, not even in the access match. So some hope for Nice, but not loads.
Yeah. But we need to talk about Soyaux Angouleme versus Dax, because again, as we said at the top, we were there. Rob, the Stade Chanzy, the game, consequential for the Six Nations as well in slightly tenuous ways.
Well, we were probably going to come into this saying, the player to watch out for, or players to watch out for from Soyaux Angouleme, and we would have gone hammer and tongs into Alex Masibaka, the number 8, who is Australian, or certainly Australian born. He was really, really, really good. He was absolutely everywhere. Brilliant carrier. Scored a couple of tries. He scores quite a few tries. I think that's like 15 in 30 or something like that for Soyaux Angouleme. And lo and behold, Monday morning, he gets called up to the Scotland squad by Gregor Townsend, which I don't think anyone, I did not know that he was Scottish in any way at all. I don't know how they found out that he's got a Scottish mother, which is fair play to the Scottish recruitment people, talent, spotters. But we kind of came out of that as being like, that's it. He's not going to be in Pro D2 for that long. He's going to be a top 14 player. Because of he was just so good. And how would you describe him? I think we kind of settled on a Simmons Mercer type player, kind of that dynamic number 8 that doesn't look huge but carries hard and really powerful.
Yeah, I think that sort of mold, because he's not that, for a number 8 anyway, he's not that tall, I don't think. I think he's about 6'1", which probably puts him in that kind of Simmonsy bracket, maybe a little bit taller. Also read he was, like they said, he's 18 and a half stone, which I'm not sure I quite believe, because I don't think many 18 and a half stone blokes are moving that quickly. But he was brilliant. He was direct, had a little bit about him, sort of with not just a kind of bowling ball 8, like there's a bit more there, decent acceleration. Just looked a little bit, I'd say a little bit sharper, quicker and more powerful than pretty much everyone else in the starting 8s. Yeah, it's easy to say a couple of days afterwards, but he was by far and away, certainly in terms of the forwards, the standout on the pitch. It looks very kind of convenient 2020. Yeah, but the only notes I wrote in the second half was Masibaka was everywhere. So there we go. Yeah, I'll screenshot it and show the edit time. I don't know. I don't think I can do that. You mentioned quite a key caveat though that you made there on most powerful in the starting 8, because both sides had a couple of blockbuster centres. One, George Tilsley, we kind of know about, but for the wrong reasons, albeit he has been very, very good since he turned up at Soyaux Angouleme after he was dispatched from Agen. And let's not forget that he was a World Cup joker for Toulouse, so he's obviously a pretty useful player. He was I saw somewhere he was a contender for Player of the Week. I think the fans' vote for Player of the Match was Arthur Proult, who was not a big bloke, but ran some brilliant lines at 13. And then on the other side, the other big unit on the field was a player that everyone knows about now, and that is Noah Nene. Who is massive.
Tell me your thoughts on Noah Nene, Richard.
I thought he looked... I don't think he was the standout centre on the pitch. I thought Angouleme overall played superbly. Like they were... I can't imagine they played much better this season. That did not look like a club kind of punching above its weight. Albeit, Dax aren't great on the road in their Karamak, McVitie's Gold Bar kit.
McVitie's Gold Bar.
That they were repping. But yeah, Nene, there was a bit of an air of, there was some real gravitas on him when he gets the ball. I don't know if that's just because he's enormous. Like he is.
Or whether it's one of those things like, are we looking out for him?
This guy?
Yeah.
But you can see why he's been picked a bit ahead of time to get in those squads. In terms of raw attributes, it's literally all there. But Dax, they had a couple of quite nice little slick plays, really nice try in the first half with a
two
inside ball and chip. But they weren't really in it from the second half onwards.
Yeah, I thought because I think the big thing is Dax have always had quite a couple of big units up front and like really physical pack. And SAXV were just able to stop them dead at maul time, which I think is an incredible skill to have, to be able to, especially in Pro D2, to just completely nullify sides from on the driving maul is brilliant. So really, really good signs. We did see Johnny May. He was quite peripheral as a player.
He went off injured, and he was talking about Owen Farrell. I don't think he looked fully fit to start with, to be honest. He looked, and he wasn't moving particularly comfortably.
No. And unfortunately, we didn't get to see Ben Botica. He didn't get on the pitch, which was a bit of a shame.
Not required.
Yeah. I think Arthur Proult was really good. Oh, the big news is Pete Lydon, Irishman, kicked a huge penalty. It was pretty strong wind. It was pretty grim conditions, which thank God it was a plastic pitch because it allowed us to see a few wonder tries, but some brilliant play from Dak certainly as well. It's kind of in his own half on the 15-metre line, and it sailed over, but he picked up a nasty injury as well, and that is possible ACL, possible meniscus tear, which is really, really sad because he again he had a massive boot, looked a really, really classy fullback. He was instrumental in getting Rouen back up to contending to stay up last season. So a couple of injuries for SAXV, which isn't great, and we're waiting to hear on the news on Pete Lydon as well.
And a final word on the Stade Chanzy as a place to go and watch rugby.
Loved it. It's still boxed in. I don't know whether that walkway on the main stand is intentionally narrow, but it makes it feel really, really congested. Your thoughts on the atmosphere, the cannon?
Oh, the cannon is loud. Yeah, don't stand near the cannon at the start of either half unless you want to rupture your eardrums. Between that and the Périgueux PA system, there's the kind of noise pollution police in France are fairly blasé.
It's a real cannon as well.
It's a proper cannon, yeah. It doesn't look real, but turns out it is.
Purple cannon in the corner.
Yeah, it's a brilliant place to watch rugby. Great views, great value. Like our ticket was I think it was €20. We were sat along the side. We could have stood behind the post, which we ended up doing for like a tenner. You can get a Merguez baguette and a beer and chips for €6 or something.
That was great.
You just have it's just a fun place to watch rugby.
They had the band
really friendly crowd.
As well.
Bit of post-match shenanigans. Yeah, it's a fantastic place to watch a game of rugby on a Friday night.
The brass band. Yeah, the brass band played a couple of bangers. Lady Gaga, Bad Romance in brass band form.
Well, as did the Périgueux brass band. They were being a little bit more. It was a little bit more urban, wasn't it? The playlist generally.
We had a bit of Black Eyed Peas, didn't we?
Black Eyed Peas
at Périgueux.
We had a bit of pre-game sort of early 2010s hip hop and R&B and stuff. It was quite good fun. But the Chanzy's an excellent place to watch rugby.
It's got like that tunnel like out the back of the stand, which it feels like a kind of aircraft hangar almost vibe where the brass band did play. And they had the big screens on for the late Friday kickoff, which is now 18 home wins from 18. And Grenoble looked pretty comfortable in it, thanks to a Caminelli Rasaku hat trick. However, they looked down and out Biarritz for quite a while. There was a fight back led by #RosBifWatch, Zach Kibarigi, probably the Rosbif of the week, actually, because he scored 2 absolute wonder tries. They are
ball in one hand.
Ball in one hand. And the gas, he still got it. It was so good to watch. One of them is on the Pro D2 top 5 of the week. There is another one, I think, if you go on the Biarritz Instagram page, it's on there, possibly. And he got taken off for 75 minutes and looked absolutely raging because he almost kind of brought them back into it single-handedly, playing a fullback. He was involved in absolutely everything. They didn't roll over Biarritz, which is good signs, but their season has flipped around entirely, hasn't it? It's done a complete 180 since they got that points deduction, really. Seems to have popped the balloon there.
I feel like there's been a bit of that, hasn't there? Things seem to be maybe reverting a tiny bit to type, as we thought at the start. Like Montauban has tailed off a little bit in the last month or so, and Biarritz, but there's still so many rounds, aren't there? We'll see. All right. Rob, I don't know if we've got any time for Petit-Fours because I think we both need to go to work. But have you got anything you want to just leave us with before we come back for a midweek special and discuss the Six Nations?
A few quick things. The Nonce Du Quang retirement video, absolutely amazing. Best retirement video ever. Getting his club president and Fabien Galtier involved. And it was a sketch of Fabien Galtier saying, I'm going to have to make change my plans entirely 2 weeks before the Six Nations. And there was a line in there from Nonce Du Quang that was like, I know that even in my, he's like talking about it times, like, I know that even in my slippers, I'm better than Penaud, Bielbarré and Buros. But, I'm just too old now. The time is gone. This decision is final. That was it's brilliant. If you haven't seen it, I managed to find one with English subtitles, which was quite lucky. The other big one, talking of Nice down at the bottom, Wasea Naisalevu is rumoured to be going there next season. It'd be quite useful if he could get there this season, I'd say.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah, and Yakuba Camara from Montpellier is going to play for Mali, which is quite cool.
Oh, wow. That's
really
cool.
But yeah, that's me done on Petit-Fours. That's the headlines anyway.
Very nice. The only one I had with a French twinge was Nonce Du Quang again, who has a quote this morning on Rugby Pass. His quote was, so he played 4 games for France, said four matches, 4 defeats, 140 points conceded. That was his reflection on his own French career in the national team, and probably a fitting way to finish this morning's pod. In the meantime, you can follow us on all the usual channels, including Blue Sky, where we are increasingly lurking. We'll be back later in the week to preview Six Nations, France's tournament, game against Wales, and who from that 42-man squad makes it into the final 23.
In the meantime, that on the socials, on Instagram, we will be putting up more photos and stuff of the weekend. So a few recommendations on there that will be kind of places to go if you want to visit these places. Unfortunately, we weren't in Périgueux long enough, and also our trip to Pomerol, which we haven't mentioned, which was possibly my highlight. Going to
maybe we can touch on that on later in the week. Yeah, give us a follow, give us a look.
Rosbifs Rugby on all social media outlets.
All right, I've been Richard. That has been Rob. We've been the Rosbifs. We'll be back later in the week for international action. But in the meantime, au revoir.
Au revoir.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.